The Rolex catalog is filled with icons. They make some of the most desired watches in the industry. But it does have one watch that in many ways is underrated, if not perhaps even overlooked, and that is the Rolex Explorer II. But the interesting thing is that even to this day, the Explorer II is one of the truest watches in the Rolex collection in terms of how it stays true to Rolex's original intent, which was to make tool watches. So to understand that, we need to rewind the clock back to 1971 and take a look at where the collection started. And thankfully here at CHRONEXT, we actually have an example of one of the original Explorer II references, the 1655. If we take ourselves back to this time period, you had the Explorer I, which was geared towards mountaineers. But this was a 36mm time-only watch. What happens if you want to not just climb a mountain, but also start going into caves? You need a few more things. And that's where the Explorer II comes in. The Explorer II was aimed at speleologists, or for those of us in layman's terms, cave divers. They needed something that was a bit more than just time only and was more useful and visible when diving through caves and navigating all of the different nooks and crannies, something a little bit more robust, but crucially, something a lot more visible in the dark and limited light conditions. Cave explorers can often spend hours on end inside a cave with no visible sunlight, and that's why the Explorer II features luminous indices as well as a second time zone. Now at the time, the caliber 1575 on the inside of the Rolex Explorer II didn't work the same way that the current one does, in the sense that it wasn't an independently settable time zone. Instead, the 24-hour hand is directly locked to your regular hour hand. Essentially, it was a glorified day-night indicator. But that was important for explorers of the time because after spending so much time without seeing the sun or the moon, they could easily lose track of whether it was day or night, and that's why this indicator was there. Giving further context to how this watch was so much more focused and more rugged compared to the original Explorer 1016 that was available at the time, remember, the Explorer I of the time was 36mm and time only. This not only featured the luminous indices as well as the 24-hour hand, but it also featured 100 meters of water resistance. It was bigger at 39mm, and that bigger diameter wasn't just for looks, it also gave it that additional legibility. And while it's true that from 1971 to 1985, there were several evolutions of dials on this model, the key thing here is that legibility was always the focus, even on the busier dials that we saw during the 1655's production run. However, everything has to come to an end, and change was on the horizon for the 1655. There was a huge shift in terms of design when we talk about going from the 1655 to the 16550. However, the 16550 only ran from 1985 to 1989. When we think of more neo-vintage Explorer IIs, we have to talk about the 16570. This carried on the evolutions of the 16550, and that's clearly seen first time when you look at the dial. When you compare the original dial to the current one, there's a world of difference. The biggest change that you can see is that now the big orange 24-hour hand of the 1655 was replaced by a slender red second time zone. This is very important because this completely changes the modern day utility of the watch in that you can actually use it as a second time zone, not as just a slave to the main hour hand. Legibility was even further improved when you look at the indices. Gone are the small square indices with their intermediary 24-hour positions, and instead you have a regular dial much more reminiscent of a Submariner or a GMT Master with the rectangular and circular indices. The 5-digit references also introduced variation in terms of the dial colors. You could now get a white dial or a black dial. Something that may seem like a small detail, however, in the pursuit of legibility, these two variations really opened up the options for potential cave divers or just for collectors as well. And probably the most important thing about the 16570 in particular is its duration. It lasted from 1989 right up until 2011, and during that time, it also hosted a bevy of evolutions and improvements that Rolex introduced along its entire catalog. Throughout this one reference, you saw the evolution from tritium to luminova. You saw the evolution in movement from the 3185 to the 3186, where it went from having a wobbly main hour hand to a much more static main hour hand, which is what we're used to in all of Rolex's modern GMTs. We also saw the introduction of security features such as the engraved ray hot. We saw the lug holes go away over time as Rolex realized that maybe it wanted the bracelet to stay on the watch instead of giving people so much freedom to change to different straps. That being said though, with this smaller case relative to the modern version, it does look great on straps. And of course the biggest change when you compare the 4-digit to the 5-digit references is the size of the case. It went up from 39 to 40 millimeters, which may not seem like such a big change. However, the significance within the Explorer II range is the fact that this would encompass the next big change within the Explorer, which was the 2011 reference 216570. This bumped the case size up not just 1 millimeter like we saw with the transition from 4-digit to 5-digit references. This time it went up a further 2 millimeters to the 42 millimeters that we know right up until today. Also, this evolution represented somewhat of a backward step, or perhaps a mixing of the two generations, if you will, because it reintroduced the orange 24-hour hand. While it was still usable as a separate time zone to the main hand, it did call back to that original 4-digit reference. So in many ways, the 6-digit references are much more of a mix of the past. And it shows that Rolex has still sort of got one eye on the future when you consider the evolutions that it has, especially on the inside, as well as the more modern case size, but it's still conscious of its past. And that's something that today we're seeing much more and more of Rolex embracing its past, and the Explorer in many ways was the testbed for that. But when you look at all three of these, again, as is always possible with most Rolexes, you can see the DNA very clearly. You can see the evolution from the 4-digit reference, which was introduced as a very purpose-built machine, to what is still a very purpose-built machine. While yes, it does have other creature comforts such as the more usable GMT hand versus just a 24-hour hand, and it also has modern sizing, it's obviously better built, but still at its core, it is a watch that would serve exactly the same purpose as its forebear from the 1970s. It's a highly legible watch with a hand that can be used as a 24-hour indicator with solid water resistance. It's robust, it has a good movement on the inside that can take a beating. In many ways, the Explorer II has stayed the truest to its original purpose, despite being one of the newer collections within what we currently see in the Rolex range. Remember, the Submariner, the GMT, the original Explorer were all introduced in the 1950s, whereas the Explorer II was first introduced in 1971. And as is often the case, it's always difficult to choose between whether you go for the original vintage or whether you go for something newer, especially with a collection where really it has very much stayed true to the original. Luckily at CHRONEXT, we have examples of all the different variations and evolutions of the Explorer II, as well as over 5,000 luxury watches from all of your favorite brands. So make sure to check the links below to see what we have on offer for your next watch. But speaking of that, if you had the opportunity to choose between these three, money no object, which would you go for? Would you go for the original 4-digit reference, knowing that you have the beginning of an era? Would you go for the transition, something that sort of has its feet in both sides? You have a more vintagey look, but you have some of the modern accommodations. Or do you want the newest one with the modern sizing and what is Rolex's interpretation of the best that this collection can be? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, if you like this video, make sure you like it and share it. And if you want to see more videos about watches, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell as well so you know when the next video comes out. Thank you though for joining us on this short journey documenting the history of the Explorer II, and we look forward to seeing you on the next video.